The ceiling is another cast plaster ceiling. It's actually a combination of two. The Spanish portion of the ceiling is the shapes, the hexagons and the diamonds. What's in the hexagons is Italian, but they were changed slightly to reflect this location. There's a belt with the word San Simeon on it, and it's around a cluster of eucalyptus leaves. Those are native to this area. There's a pot that looks like it's got flames. House for cocktails at about 7 or 8. He'd already had a couple in his room, but then the flake off.
So they divided this like the same as the other one?
Right, and they had a repeating mold. They would just make squares and then just repeat them on the ceiling and then put them all together and paint them and build them. Let me show you one more thing before we leave the house. I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the people that made these rugs didn't make them all in one place. They made them as they traveled because they were nomadic people. They were raising herds of sheep. That's where the wool came from. So they never dyed enough blue wool to do the entire... No. Which paintings were you particularly wondering about? Hello?
Casa del Monte, one of the guest houses at Hearst Castle.
Okay, that sarcophagus up there is another piece of sarcophagy with what Romans buried dead people in at some point. That one is a nice one. It's got depictions of the 9 muses on it. Does anybody know who the muses were? They were the inspirations of the arts and sciences, and if you think about it, well, let's make our way over to the big house now. Oh, look at some of this lovely tile work that Julia Morgan's office created. This is called Cuenca tile. The reason it's called Cuenca is because it's got strictly defined areas where you can just fill it up with its color and it won't overflow into the other area. We've got dragons and little animals and stuff. Gardeners took the colors of the hydrangeas and they almost perfectly mirrored them by selecting certain kinds of tattoos. The only thing they weren't really able to do, not to my satisfaction, at least, are the blue hydrangeas. You can't really get a blue tattoo. Maybe there are. Up to the 3rd floor because you really had to climb on top of a very tall room. And if I could ask a favor, whoever the last one drew, please, is Terry could go to
Yeah. It's like
Okay, we're going to go upstairs now just to remember the last person to please call. So that, whereas in the guest house, the 4 guest bedrooms had to share the sitting room. In this house, your bedroom has this sitting room, and so you're not actually sharing this room with anyone else. The ceiling is again a Spanish pine ceiling. It looks a lot different than the ceiling in the previous room because this one has what we call exposed beams. Standing under, look at the width of that arch. That's not normal for an interior arch. This was at one time, right where he and I are standing, a solid wall. This is where the wing ended. Why did Hearst add 30 feet to the wing? Look out the window over there. Do you see the other wing of the building? That wing of the building was longer than this one. Hearst didn't like things that were not symmetrical. So he said to his workmen, you know what? Let's add 30 feet to the new wing. We'll get extra bedrooms out of it, which they did. So this has become a kind of an interesting suite where you have the bedroom, a bedroom, sitting room, almost in a continuous space. Also an interesting ceiling in here. Why so? It's a combination. Yeah, it's got tile and wood. And both of those crafts were things that the people of southern Spain did very, very well. This is also another instance of one time where they used a ceiling in more than one place. This was such a large ceiling that they... It is a fairly short bath, but remember this. The bathroom fittings and fixtures of the 1920s and 30s oftentimes did not contain showers. So in this instance, I think what they were doing was they were downsizing the bathtub a little bit because you had not only a bath but also a shower. And they were calling them not showers, but French cascades, because there was no word shower in the American vocabulary in the 1920s. They had brought the idea over from Europe. French cascade. So we're going to walk along the connecting corridor. You didn't walk through someone else's room to get to yours. You didn't know the hallway in the house, but actually of low humidity. If we were to open the doors and windows right now, the humidity would not only drop, but it would drop very rapidly, and that's what's bad for things like things in the room. Somebody asked if that was a skirt. No, it was a cope, not a religious person's cape, but actually just a gentleman's cope. You ever hear that expression, he or she was on their deathbed? That's what this is. It's a deathbed. We didn't tell the guests that back in those days, but see the cutout in the headboard? That's where they would have put the holy water and the oil that they anoint with and so forth. The portrait family in Italy, but now we think it's just somebody that's a contemporary of hers. This painting was done in the early 1500s. And the reason for it is because people had a problem back in the early 16th century. You know what it was? The haircut of the 1920s and 30s, which was the rage back then. One more, his is dated 1609. They're also done at a very transitional time in the period in the history of art, where they had gone over from the egg tempera paints that they had used back in the Gothic period. They're now using oil paints, but what are they painting on? It's not canvas. What is it? Off in his arms and the metal on his chest. That was good. Anybody speak French? There's a French verb. You can whisper. You can talk about somebody else in the room without them hearing you. Sweetie,
Gossip
folks,
chairs.
This is Hearst Castle, a sumptuous private estate high above Central California's rocky coast. It was built over a period of nearly 30 years by publisher William Randolph Hearst. Who designed this architectural fantasy, and why was this style chosen? How was it built? Why was this remote site selected, and why did construction continue for so long? The estate is part of the Hearst Ranch, properties bought by George Hearst, William Randolph's father, who had made a fortune in gold and silver mines. George, his wife Phoebe Apperson Hearst, and their only son enjoyed camping here. They came by boat to San Simeon Harbor. In 1919, at the age of 56, William Randolph Hearst began to plan an elaborate group of buildings here on what he called La Cuesta Encantada, the Enchanted Hill. Mediterranean revival architecture, made popular by the 1915 expositions in San Diego and San Francisco, was chosen for Hearst's new venture. Julia Morgan, who had been a protege of Phoebe Hearst, was selected as architect. Morgan earned her degree in civil engineering at the University of California and was awarded a certificate in architecture at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. She was the first woman ever to do so. Construction proceeded simultaneously on the main house and 3 guest houses. To furnish and embellish them, Hearst drew upon his extensive collections of art and antiques, acquired through American auction houses and agents abroad. He bought not only works of art, but parts of ancient churches and even an entire monastery. Antiques and art objects continued to arrive at San Simeon in an endless flood. Through constant changes in decoration and design, Morgan incorporated Hearst's treasures into the ever-expanding structures on the hilltop. Hearst himself participated in every aspect of the design. He and Morgan carried on a 30-year correspondence of suggested alterations and improvements. Morgan also oversaw the landscape. Nigel Keith was the head groundsman for many years. He planted nearly 70,000 trees here, transforming the grassy hillsides into exotic forests. Work on the gardens and walks continued right along with the building construction. Hearst bought and moved full-grown cypress trees to the site. The entire root systems of mature live oaks were encased in concrete tubs, and the trees were moved to new locations. These were major engineering feats for the time. Reinforced concrete was used throughout the entire castle. This was a time-tested construction material for country subject to fire and earthquake. La Casa del Mar was the first building occupied by Hearst and his guests. The remaining two casas were completed soon afterward. All eventually became guest houses. The castle itself, of course, was a far larger and more complex structure. Work on the facade and towers went ahead steadily during the early 1920s. By 1925, the front of the castle looked much as it does today. Hearst and his companion, actress Marion Davies, hosted lavish parties at San Simeon. It became clear that more accommodations were needed for their guests. At the rear of the castle, two huge wings were begun and were enlarged piecemeal. The north wing housed guest rooms and suites. The south wing contained the kitchen and servants' quarters. Interior decoration in the main part of the castle is incredibly ornate. Vast projects were undertaken on the hilltop. The most extravagant by far was the Neptune Pool with its adjacent terrace and cascade. Constant changes in their design and configuration provide a remarkable example of the endless refinements and enlargements that were made as Hearst's vision grew steadily more grand. By the early 1930s, dressing rooms in the Neptune Terrace had been added above the cascade. The magnificent pool and its ornate setting were complete at last. In 1929, near La Casa del Monte, the present extraordinarily large terrace was begun as part of a plan to create a grand entrance for the estate. Between the stairways leading to the terrace, 3 elaborate statuary groups were to be installed. The terrace replaced the original long flight of stairs leading up to the main house. Earlier terraces, which were left hidden underneath in their original form. Building continued on this extravagant estate as the Great Depression of the 1930s gripped the country. Work at the castle was an enormous boon to the local community. Construction was suspended during World War II, and Hearst and Marion Davies retreated to Wintoon, another elaborate Hearst estate in Northern California. After the war, construction resumed on the castle. There had never been a limit to Hearst's plan for his green castle, and a vast amount of work remained to be done. Surface stonework and decoration were unfinished on the rear of the castle itself and on both wings. At different times, there were plans for an art gallery or a grand ballroom to connect the wings and enclose the rear courtyard. Health problems, however, forced Hearst to leave the castle in 1947. The next year, work came to an end. The estate was far from complete, but time was running out. It was an inconceivably grand dream for one man's lifetime, even for a man with unlimited resources. Perhaps realize our fondest dreams. Perhaps the most splendid dreams of all are those without limits. So long as the dreamer lived, this dream had no end. Randolph Hearst died in 1951 at the age of 88.
These courts have been resurfaced and also we got them to drain a little bit better than they had done. You're going to see that there was some damage to the ceiling of the indoor pool because of water leakage down through the concrete room. So let's go down underneath the tennis courts now, and we'll probably listen to the Tour 1 guy tell us about the indoor. We asked him at the beginning
Santa Lucia Mountains. Go ahead, Ryan. Some more. The buses.
That's amazing.